Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books. It's Saturday here in Houston, and there's all kinds of programs and gurus and... Friday? Did I say Friday?
You said Saturday.
Friday. I meant Friday. Well, we have a doctor in the room, and she's a fact checker. She listens to every single word, and if it's not right, she gets it. That's how she cures diseases. Anyway, it's Friday, that's what I meant to say, and there's lots of programs going on at the same time, and the Friday program, and the doctor symposium, and different gurus here, and I was thinking I wasn't going to have anybody, and I was going to speak to cyberspace, but we have so far 6, Vaishnava bodies here, eager to hear. So let's go. Let's get into it. All right. We're a little late. I was waiting to see if somebody would come. Okay. So, Sanatana Goswami, let's hear his prayer, and then we'll dive into the 11th canto again, Srimad-Bhagavatam. Srimad-Bhagavatam Mahima Stotram. All of you out in cyberspace, anybody who doesn't know, we chant this every day, and it's a glorification of the Srimad-Bhagavatam by Sanatana Goswami, who Lord Chaitanya himself accepted as his authority. Lord Chaitanya was on his way to Vrindavan, and he stopped by Rupa and Sanatan's house on the way, and there were so many people with Lord Chaitanya, millions. And Sanatana Goswami said, this is not a good way to go to Vrindavan, all these people, you're not going to be able to fulfill your desire doing this. And Lord Chaitanya said, you're right. So Sanatana Goswami was the prime minister, practically, chief minister of Nawab Hussain Shah's government in that area of India at the time. So yes, he was very senior, he was very advanced, both spiritually and materially, in all ways, learned. So here's his glorification. By the blessings of Lord Chaitanya, which, by the way, he told the residents of Jagannath Puri, that he gave his full mercy to Sanatana Goswami. And he went on and on and on about how qualified he is. Okay. It goes like this. Sarva Sachkat Vipu Piyusha Sarva Vedaika Satpala Sarva Siddhat Ratnadya Sarva Lokaika Drik Prada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths. You are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana, Srimad Bhagavata Prabho, Kalidwan Dorita Ditya, Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life, heir of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master, Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshakshadayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Sri Krishnaya Namostume. I bow down to you who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguro Man Mahadana Madnistadaka Madbhagya Mad Anandana Mostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu sadhuta dayin atinit chucheta kada anamuncha kadachin mam premna rit kantayos Buddha. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me, always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo
Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
So, the Yavnogendras, Nava-yogendras, have come to the sacrifice of King Nimi, king of Videha, and he's recognized them as Paramahansa, liberated souls, Mahabhagavats, and he's inquiring from them. And now we're on the fourth chapter of the fourth verse of the third chapter of the 11th canto, and Antariksha, the third of the 9 Nava-yogendras, is speaking about illusory energy, the material energy of the Lord, and how we can get free from it. Timely, important subject for all of us in this material world. Text 4. The super soul enters the material bodies of the created beings, activates the mind and senses, and thus causes the conditioned souls to approach the 3 modes of material nature for sense gratification. Purport. The following is a summary of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's commentary on this verse. The one super soul enters the gross material elements, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, and uses the activated material mind to subtly divide the sensory activities of the conditioned souls under the 5 knowledge-acquiring senses, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. And by a further gross division, the 5 working senses, the hands, legs, speech, genitals, and anus, because liberated souls have a strong tendency to serve the Lord. They are not attracted by the dualities of material good and evil. Because liberated souls have a strong tendency to serve the Lord, they are not attracted by the dualities of material good and evil. They derive their pleasure through devotion and love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who eternally enjoys his own transcendental pastimes beyond the material manifestation. When the conditioned souls forget their loving relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they develop illicit desires. Therefore, unable to serve the form, taste, fragrance, and other aspects of Lord Vishnu, these souls become bound to the bitter fruits of fruitive activities. But if their love of Godhead is somehow or other awakened, the conditioned souls can dovetail all their sensory activities in the service of the Lord's transcendental pastimes. Actually, all materialistic activities are most undesirable, but the conditioned soul, under the influence of illusion, sees apparent distinctions between good and bad, pleasing and displeasing, and so on. The Lord, the Super Soul, having entered the collective and individual consciousness of the living entities, knows the heart of everyone. Therefore, when a sincere soul aspires for spiritual perfection, the Lord frees him from material bondage and arouses his propensity to serve the Lord of Vaikuntha. Love of Godhead flourishes in the variegated flavors of transcendental enjoyment. In ignorance, however, the conditioned soul considers himself the proper object of service. In ignorance, however, the conditioned soul considers himself the proper object of service, and thus misunderstands the entire existential situation. That's the situation. Text 5. The individual living being, the master of the material body, uses his material senses, which have been activated by the Supersoul, to try to enjoy sense objects composed of the 3 modes of nature. Thus, he misidentifies the created material body with the unborn, eternal self, and becomes entangled in the illusory energy of the Lord. Purport. In this verse, the living entity is called Prabhu, or Master, because he is a minute part and parcel of the Supreme Master, Krishna. Similarly, in the Bhagavad Gita 15.8, the Lord has described the living entity as Ishvara, the controller. Shariram yad avapnoti yach chap utkramati grihit by tani sangyati bayur gandan ibashayad. The living entity in the material world carries his various conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas. Srila Prabhupada has commented in his purport. Here the living entity is described as Ishvara, the controller of his own body. If he likes, he can change his body to a higher grade, and if he likes, he can move to a lower class. Minute independence is there. The change of body the change his body undergoes depends upon him. This statement confirms the words Somatra and Atma Prasidaye in text 3 of this chapter. If the Supreme Lord were to interfere with the minute independence of the living entity, there would be no question of the living entities engaging in the loving service of the Lord, since love implies a spontaneous, free choice by the lover. Here the word Prabhu indicates that just as a child, having received a toy car from his father, pedals on the sidewalk, imitating the father, who drives an actual car, the living entity pedals around the material universe in the innumerable material bodies selected for him by the Supreme Lord, from an assortment of 8,400,000 species. Thus the living entity, infatuated with the false ego of the material body, creates a fearful situation in which he undergoes repeated birth and death, as described in the statement, Vayam tutiya binibeshatak syat, Bhagavatam 11:2-37. Srila Jiva Goswami has given another explanation for this verse. If the word Prabhu is taken to mean the Supreme Lord, the word Gunai can be understood to mean good qualities, since Guna can refer to the material modes of nature or to admirable qualities, as in the verse Yasyasti Bhaktir Bhagavatya Kinchana Sarvair Gunais Tatra Samasate Suraha. This verse would then mean that the Lord, by his transcendental qualities, gunai, such as mercy, is able to relish the transcendental qualities, gunan, of his pure devotees. Atma, pradyotitai, would then indicate that by surrendering unto the Lord, who is the reservoir of all good qualities, the pure devotees become similarly endowed with godly qualities. My faith in humanity is restored. An honest man has appeared in the world. I know that he's so much in demand, even when he promises to come. Love is blind, and he may be taken away by some loving person. But here he is. Thank you, Maharaj. We're hearing Antariksha elaborate upon the modes of nature and how they work and how we can become liberated from them. He's number 3 out of 9. We're reading from chapter 3 of the 11th canto, and we're right now on text 5, I think, is it? Yes, 5. Now he's elaborating on Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is paraphrasing, or the devotees are paraphrasing Bhaktivinoda Thakur's commentary on this verse. And to come to the conclusion that gunai can actually mean good qualities also, if it's taken in the right context. Okay. Srila Jiva Goswami has given another explanation for this verse. If the word Prabhu is taken to mean the Supreme Lord, the word gunai can be understood to mean good qualities, since guna can refer to the material modes of goodness or to admirable qualities. As in the verse, Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavati kinchana sarvair gunais tatra samasate suraha. This verse would then mean that the Lord, by his transcendental qualities, gunai, such as mercy, is able to relish the transcendental qualities, gunan, of his pure devotees. Atma pradyotitai would then indicate that by surrendering unto the Lord, who is the reservoir of all good qualities, the pure devotees become similarly endowed with godly qualities. The words manyamana idam shristam atmanam would indicate that the Lord accepts the body of his pure devotee to be on the same spiritual level as he himself, as indicated in the verse Acharyam mam bijaniyan navamanyeta kartachit. The Lord is attracted by the loving devotional service of his pure devotees, and thus becomes entangled in the network of their loving relationship with him. For example, after the battle of Kurukshetra, when Krishna was leaving for his own city, Dwarka, the loving appeal of Maharaj Yudhishthira forced the Lord to remain for several more weeks in Hastinapur. Similarly, when the elderly gopis of Vrindavan clapped their hands, Krishna would dance like a puppet, keeping time to their rhythm. In relation to this subject matter, Srila Jiva Goswami has quoted a verse from Srimad-Bhagavatam 9.4.68. Sadhavo hridayam mayam, sadhunam hridayam twaham, mananyat, madanyat, tena jananti, naham tebhyok manag api. The pure devotee is always within the core of my heart, and I am always in the heart of the pure devotee. My devotees do not know anything but me, and I do not know anyone but them. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the word Prabhu may also be understood as follows. The word pra indicates prakarshina, or excessively, and bhu indicates bhavati, or taking birth. Thus Prabhu indicates prakarshena deva tiryag adishu bhavatiti saha, or repeatedly taking birth among the demigods, animals, human beings, and other forms of life. Confirming the statement by Srila Jiva Goswami concerning the Lord's attachment to the spiritualized body of the pure devotee, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has quoted the following verses from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Antya 4, 192 and 93. Diksha Kali Bhakta Kari Atma Samarpana Se Kali Krishna Tari Kari Atma Sama. At the time of initiation, when a devotee fully surrenders unto the service of the Lord, Krishna accepts him to be as good as himself. Se Dehakari Tara Chiranandamaya Aprakita Dehitandra Charana Bhajaya. When the Lord's body is thus transformed into spiritual existence, the devotee in that transcendental body renders service to the lotus feet of the Lord. Text 6. Impelled by deep-rooted material desires, the embodied living entity engages his active sense organs in fruitive activities. He then experiences the results of his material actions by wandering throughout this world in so-called happiness and distress. Purport. The argument may be given that if a living entity were subject to the results of his previous activities, there would be no scope for free will. Once having committed a sinful action, the living entity would be bound in an endless chain of suffering, being perpetually subject to previous reactions. According to this speculation, there cannot be a just and omniscient God, since the living entity is forced to commit sinful activities by the reactions of his previous activities, which were reactions to still previous activities. Since even an ordinary gentleman will not unfairly punish an innocent person, how could there be a God witnessing the helpless suffering of the conditioned souls within this world? This foolish argument can easily be refuted by a practical example. If I purchase a ticket for an airline flight, board the plane, and commence the flight, once the plane is taken off, my destination to my decision to board the plane forces me to continue flying until the plane lands. But although I am forced to accept the reaction of this decision on board the plane, I have many new decisions I can make. I may accept the food and drink from the stewardesses or reject it. I may read a magazine or newspaper. I may sleep, walk up and down the aisle, converse with other passengers, so on. In other words, although the general context, flying to a particular city, is forcibly imposed upon me as a reaction to my previous decision to board the plane, even within that situation, I am constantly making new decisions and creating new reactions. For example, if I cause a disturbance on the airplane, I may be arrested when the plane lands. That happens nowadays, more often than before. On the other hand, if I make friends with a businessman sitting next to me on the plane, such a contact may lead to a favorable business transaction in the future. Similarly, although the living entity is forced to accept a particular body by the laws of karma, within the human form of life, there is always scope for free will and decision-making. Therefore, the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot be considered unjust for holding the living entity in human life responsible for his present activities, despite the living entity's undergoing the reactions of his previous work. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the influence of Maya is so strong that even in a hellish condition, the proud conditioned soul thinks that he is enjoying life. Text 7. Thus, the conditioned living entity is forced to experience repeated birth and death. Impelled by the reactions of his own activities, he helplessly wanders from one inauspicious situation to another, suffering from the moment of creation until the time of cosmic annihilation. Not too smart. Purport. According to Srila Madhvacharya, after hearing that the living entity is repeatedly subjected to birth and death within the material world, if one still considers such a helpless entity equal to God in all respects, one will surely fall into the darkest regions of the universe, from which it is difficult to rise. Text 8. When the annihilation of the material elements is imminent, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his form of eternal time, withdraws the manifest cosmos, consisting of gross and subtle features, and the entire universe vanishes into non-manifestation. Purport. In the third canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam, Lord Kapila teaches that the material nature originally exists in an inert state of equilibrium called pradhan. When Lord Vishnu casts his potent glance in the form of kala, or time, material interactions take place, culminating in the variegated creation of the material cosmos. In this verse, it is stated that at the end of universal time, the same kala that originally incited the female nature into manifestation again withdraws the cosmos into its original state of inert, non-manifestation. According to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the time potency itself, kala, is then withdrawn, and it merges into the Supreme Soul, who manifests himself as the original cause of material nature. Anadir Adir Govinda, Sarva, Karana, Karanam. Such technical arrangements for creation and annihilation, birth and death, do not exist in the eternal spiritual kingdom of God. In the spiritual sky, the variegated spiritual enjoyment of the Lord and His devotees is not hampered by the inferior cycles of birth, maintenance, and destruction found in the material world. Text 9. As cosmic annihilation approaches, a terrible drought takes place on earth for 100 years. For 100 years, the heat of the sun gradually increases, and its blazing heat begins to torment the three worlds. 10. Beginning from Pataloka, a fire grows, emanating from the mouth of Lord Sankarshan. Its flames shooting upward, driven by great winds, it scorches everything in all directions. This is happening right now in Australia, in a smaller scale. You can't stop it. Helpless. Text 11. Hordes of clouds, called Sambartaka, pour torrents of rain for 100 years, flooding down in raindrops as long as the trunk of an elephant. The deadly rainfall submerges the entire universe in water. So you want to stick around? This is, you want to see it? Text 12. Then by Raja Brahma, the soul of the universe, in universal form, gives up his universal body, O king, and enters into the subtle, unmanifest nature, like a fire that has run out of fuel. Purport. According to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the word Vairaja in this verse indicates the totality of the individual conditioned souls who originally take birth from Brahma and are amalgamated back into him at the time of annihilation. By the manifestation of the Virat Purusha, the universal form of the Lord, there is a temporary display of forms, qualities, and activities within the material creation. But the entire cosmic scene reverts to inert formlessness when the creation is withdrawn by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the Lord's universal form cannot be accepted as an eternal form of the Lord. It is merely the temporary, imaginary resemblance of His personal form within the kingdom of Maya. In the first canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam, as well as in the second canto, the universal form of the Lord is clearly explained to be an imaginary form offered to the neophyte for meditation on God. To those who are excessively materialistic, are totally unable to understand that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is actually Satchit Ananda Vigraha, or the eternal form of bliss and knowledge, transcendental to the exhibition of material nature. Therefore, to encourage such gross materialists to become faithful theists, the Vedic literature instructs them to meditate upon the physical universe as the gigantic body of the Supreme Lord. This pantheistic conception does not reflect ultimate reality of the Supreme Lord, but is a technique to bring the mind gradually toward God. Srila Sridhar Swami has quoted the following verse as evidence that Lord Brahma is supposed to go back to Godhead at the time of annihilation. Brahmana sahate sarve samprapte pratisanchade padasyante vitatmana pravishyanti padam padam. At the time of full annihilation, all self-realized souls enter with Brahma into the Supreme Soul abode. Since Brahma is sometimes considered the best devotee of the Supreme Lord, he surely should obtain liberation rather than merely entering into the unmanifest state of material nature called avyakta. In this connection, Srila Sridhar Swami points out that there is a class of non-devotees who attain the planet of Brahma by performing Ashwamedha yagyas and other sacrifices. And in certain cases, Brahma himself may not be a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the words avyaktam vishate sukshmam can be understood to indicate that such a non-devotee Brahma cannot enter the spiritual sky, despite having achieved the ultimate universal status of material expertise. But when Brahma is a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the word avyaktam can be taken to indicate the spiritual sky, since the spiritual sky is not manifest to the conditioned souls. It may also be considered avyakta. If even Lord Brahma cannot enter the kingdom of God without surrendering to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then what to speak of other so-called pious or expert non-devotees? In this regard, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has pointed out that there are three categories within the status of Brahma, namely those of karmi, jnani, and the devotee. A Brahma, who is the most exalted karmi of the universe, will have to come back to the material world. A living entity who has achieved the post of Brahma by being the greatest speculative philosopher within the universe may attain impersonal liberation. And a living entity who has been awarded the post of Brahma due to being a great devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead enters into the personal abode of the Lord. In the Srimad-Bhagavatam 3:32, 12 through 15, yet another case is described. A Brahma who is a devotee of the Lord, but who has the tendency to think himself independent of or equal to the Lord, may achieve Mahavishnu's abode at the time of annihilation. But when creation begins again, he has to return and again take the post of Brahma. The word used in this case is Veda Drishya, which refers to the tendency to think oneself independently powerful. The various destinations possible for such an exalted living entity as a Lord Brahma definitely prove that any material position is worthless for guaranteeing an eternal life of bliss and knowledge. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna promises that if one gives up all other so-called obligations and surrenders to the devotional service of the Lord will personally protect him and bring him back to the supreme abode in the spiritual sky. It is futile and foolish to try to achieve perfection by one's own strenuous endeavor and not surrender to the lotus feet of Krishna. Such a blind attempt is described in the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita as Bahulayasam, indicating that it is work in the material mode of passion. Brahma is the Lord of passion, and his creation and management of the entire universe are certainly Bahulayasam, or strenuous endeavor, in the most exalted sense. But all such passionate work even that of Lord Brahma, is ultimately useless without surrender to the lotus feet of Krishna. Text 13. Deprived of its quality of aroma by the wind, the element earth is transformed into water. And water, deprived of its taste by that same wind, is merged into fire. Purport. Srimad-Bhagavatam gives several descriptions of the material creation, by which air is expanded from ether, fire from air, water from fire, and earth from water. Now in the reverse order, the creation is wound up. Thus earth merges back into the water from which it came, and water, similarly, merges into fire. Text 14. Fire, deprived of its form by darkness, dissolves into the element air. When the air loses its quality of touch by the influence of space, the air merges into that space. When space is deprived of its tangible quality by the Supreme Soul in the form of time, space merges into false ego and emotive ignorance. Text 15. My dear King, the material senses and intelligence merge into false ego in the mode of passion from which they arose. And the mind, along with the demigods, merges into false ego in the mode of goodness. Then the total false ego, along with all of its qualities, merges into the Mahat Tattva. Text 16. I have now described Maya, the illusory energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This illusory potency, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is empowered by the Lord for the creation, maintenance, and annihilation of the material universe. Now, what more do you wish to hear? Purport. King Nimi had expressed to the Navayogendras his fear of the illusory potency of the Lord, and had requested a detailed explanation of Maya so that he could avoid becoming a victim at her hands. Now, Sri Antariksha, having described the illusory potency, is suggesting that the king inquire about the means to become totally free of Maya's influence. Not waiting for the king to ask such a question, Sri Antariksha himself is suggesting, now that you have heard about Maya's influence, you should inquire about the process of becoming free from such influence. According to Sridhar Swami, that is the significance of Sri Antariksha's question, Kim Bhuya Shrutum Ichchasi. What more do you wish to hear? The following is a summary of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's explanation of the process of annihilation described in the previous verses. Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the presiding deity of consciousness, which becomes manifest within the Mahat Tattva. By further transformations of the Mahat Tattva, the threefold false ego appears as follows. 1. From Vaikarika, false ego in the mode of goodness, appears the 11th sense, the mind, whose presiding deity is Aniruddha. 2. From Taijasa, false ego in the mode of passion, comes intelligence, whose presiding deity is Pradyumna. And the 5 working senses and 5 knowledging acquiring senses with their various presiding deities. 3. From false ego in the mode of ignorance arises the subtle form of sound, and from that sound, or shabda, all the material elements gradually become manifest, beginning with ether and the sense of hearing. The presiding deity of these 3 divisions of false ego is Sankarshan. This description is taken from the chapter 26 of the third canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam, verses 21, 27, 28, 30, 31, 32, and 35. Prabhupada's scholarship was passed on to his loving devotees. Huh? The Supreme Personality of Godhead's external potency, Maya, causes the birth, maintenance, and destruction of the material world. She is tricolored, red, white, and black. In her red feature, the material nature is created. In white, it endures, and in black, it is annihilated. The Mahatattva arises from this Maya, and from the Mahatattva come the three varieties of false ego mentioned above. At the time of annihilation, the five great elements, namely earth, water, fire, air, and ether, merge into false ego in the mode of ignorance, from which they were originally generated. The 10 senses and intelligence merge into false ego and passion, and the mind, along with the demigods, merges into false ego in the mode of goodness, which then merges into Mahatattva, which further takes shelter of the Prakriti, or unmanifest Pradhan. As described above, each of the gross elements is wound up when its distinguishing quality is removed. The element then merges into the previous element. This can be understood as follows. In space or ether, there is the quality of sound. In air, there are the qualities of sound and touch. In fire, there are sound, touch, and form. In water, there are sound, touch, form, and taste. And in earth, there are sound, touch, form, taste, and aroma. Therefore, from ether down to earth, each element is distinguished by the addition of its own unique quality, called guna vishesham. When that quality is removed, an element becomes non-different from its previous element, and thus merges into it. For example, when great winds take aroma away from the earth, earth contains only sound, touch, form, and taste, and thus becomes non-different from water, into which it merges. Similarly, when the water loses its rasa, or taste, it contains only sound, touch, and form, thus becoming non-different from fire, which also contains those three qualities. So the wind takes away aroma to merge earth into water, and takes away taste to merge water into fire. Then when the universal darkness removes form from fire, fire merges into air. Space then removes the sense of touch from air, and air merges into space. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, as the time element, removes sound from space, and space then merges into the false ego in the mode of ignorance, from which it arose. Finally, false ego is merged into the Mahatattva, which is merged into the unmanifest Pradhan, and thus the universe is annihilated. This is esoteric Sankhya philosophy. We'll go one more, and then give some time to have reflections. Text 17. King Nimi said, "O great sage, please explain how even a foolish materialist can easily cross over the illusory energy of the Supreme Lord, which is always insurmountable for those who are not self-controlled." Purport. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, Stula Diya indicates those who ignorantly identify themselves with the gross material body, and who are therefore unable to analyze the subtle laws of nature by which the soul transmigrates in illusion. Srila Jiva Goswami comments that Stula Diya also indicates so-called pious persons who execute pompous religious ceremonies for material sense gratification, rather than trying to prepare themselves to go back home, back to Godhead. by engaging in the loving devotional service of the Lord. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur, King Nimi was already an advanced devotee of the Lord, and therefore knew that one can cross over the illusory energy Maya by surrendering to the lotus feet of the Lord and pleasing Him by pure devotional service. Therefore the king was asking the question for the benefit of those who falsely consider themselves very much learned, but in fact are addicted to materialistic fruitive activities, which increasingly entangle them in illusion. In this regard, Srila Vishwanath Chakrabarti has quoted from the Amarakosha dictionary to show that akritatmavi indicates a purnatvam, or one whose life is empty. Every living being has an eternal relationship with the Supreme Living Being, Krishna. One may love Krishna by thinking of Him as one's eternal master, one's most intimate friend, one's beloved child, or the object of one's conjugal attraction. Of course, such ecstasy should never be confused with ordinary material emotions, which are perverted reflections of spiritual rasas or relationships. In the material world, we try to relish these same relationships of servitude, friendship, parental love, and conjugal love. But the object of such feelings is a temporary material body, which is quickly devastated by the laws of nature. These loving feelings should be directed toward the spiritual body of the Supreme Personality of Krishna, who is the reservoir of all beauty and transcendental bliss. One who has not learned the art of directing his love to Krishna is apurna, or one whose life is ultimately empty. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakrabarti, one whose life is empty can also be called mandadi, or one whose intelligence is crippled by a lack of broad experience. King Nimi, a pure Vaishnava, was so kind that he asked, how can such cripple-minded people cross over Maya in the easiest way possible, since by nature they are very lazy in spiritual matters? And we'll stop our reading there at 7 o'clock. Give us a half an hour at least, or more. And if you want to keep going after, I have to go at 7:30, but if you want to keep going after that, that's fine. It's fine with me. Okay, magic. Open mic moment. Yes, Lily. But you have to have a mic with you. Yes.
May I ask 2 questions? What should be our mood when reading creation and annihilation, which seems so beyond our puny capacities to understand, and it goes on for chapters?
I was just thinking. What should we be thinking? Well, the first thing we should be thinking is, ooh, how wonderful that is, and how much beyond my thinking power it is. So I should become submissive to it. I mean, we'll immediately accept some dingbat physicist who says that, 5 trillion years ago there was a big bang, and we're just now hearing the sound of it, or we're just now hearing some of the effects of it. And we're supposed to accept this. I think my understanding is that when we actually accept it, rather than challenge it, thinking that because we can't see it, it must not or can't be true, or something like that. If we actually become submissive and hear submissively, and then look, at the material nature, and see that Earth does have all those qualities, And the water does have all the qualities except for fragrance. Except if it's polluted by some factory or something, the chemicals are making it reek. But generally water doesn't have the aroma that the earth has. But it has taste, it has form, it has sound. You can hear it, you can taste it, you can see it. So I think it's a matter of following the train of thought and then looking at the world and confirming with your own observation to a limited degree how it must be like that or something like that. And then we can better enter into the wonder of the creation rather than just standing back and saying, oh, this is too much for me. I might as well just stay where I am, or I might as well do something else than try to understand this. And then if we apply our intelligence to try to understand it, and then learn it, memorize it, learn it, and be able to explain it to someone else, then it becomes alive, and it can cause another person to have wonder. How wonderful that is! That thought, I never could think like that. So in this way, we can become submissive to superior knowledge. I mean, when I was younger, the philosophy was, it's what some people, that if someone could speak in such a way as he couldn't understand a word he was saying, then he must be more intelligent and deep than you, so you should study the person. And there's so many Western philosophers that ended up being studied like that. But having come in direct contact with one, his name was Alan Watts, and finding out after going back to the green room to inquire from him how he, within a few minutes, took out his flask and started to guzzle something that ended up him being drunk as a skunk. And therefore I understood, this guy doesn't understand what he's talking about, and that's why you can't understand what he's saying. But when Prabhupada speaks, and when this philosophy speaks, it's clear. It makes things more clear. It gives one a deeper understanding of what reality is. And we can look at the world and see it for what it is and feel more confident. This is knowledge. So the knowledge is meant to detach us from the entanglement in it. That's all I got.
That's good.
For that one. Huh?
That's good.
But you get number 2. Whatever it is.
The second question is a little technical, just for, again, clarification. Like scriptures say there are 400,000 species of human beings, but out of which only one is evolved enough to take to spiritual life. Or am I understanding it right?
It's true.
Mm.
Out of the 8,400,000 species of life. Yeah, it's true that out of the 8,400,000 species of life, 400,000 are varieties of human species. But anyone who is in the human form of life has the possibility of understanding God, his eternal relationship with God, and going back to Godhead. And those 400,000 species includes those on higher planets, such as demigods, not all on Earth. Yeah. It's a precious form of life for that reason, and we should take advantage of it for the purpose for which it is uniquely meant.
Mm. He always turns it back to me, like it's just getting to be complex. Anyway, Hare Krishna. Yes, Pranach. Save the day. Take us there. Come on, take us to the next take us to the next level. Go ahead. You can do it.
That was really nice. I liked how it spoke about, some of the purports spoke about the living entity's free will, and how there would be no question of the living entities engaging in the loving service of the Lord, since love implies a spontaneous free choice by the lover. And then another statement was, although the living entity is forced to accept a particular body by the laws of karma, within the human form of life there is always scope for free will and decision-making. And I just wanted to reflect on those two, because if we sometimes there's the concept that we are just a product of our circumstances and we have to just suffer or whatever, but really I think in the Gita 13th chapter Krishna says something like the living entity is the cause of his happiness and distress, whereas the material nature is the cause of the various can't remember exactly what Krishna says, but it seems like the living entity has free will to choose, and if we're not choosing to engage in Krishna's service, then we must be choosing something else. So if we're not happy, then we're not engaged. Does it mean that because Krishna's service, susukam kartam avyayam, is blissful, then does that mean that we're willfully choosing not to engage in Krishna's service?
Yes, Srila Prabhupada says that the living entity has minute independence. And the minute independence is that he can choose to serve Krishna or Maya. Those are basically the only two choices he has. And if he chooses to serve Krishna, he gets one result, becomes happy, and if he chooses to serve Maya, he gets another result, which is he becomes, he suffers. But the discussion was very interesting, that because we engage in sinful activities at a certain stage, we suffer sinful reactions. And those sinful reactions in turn generate more sinful reactions. And in the Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami analyzes, with reference to scripture, the different phases of sinful reactions, like prarabdha, kuta, bij. And bij means like the seed of a sinful action, which you could say is the desire. And kuta is an even prior stage, which just means a tendency towards that desire. But bhakti is so powerful that it destroys all of these phases of sinful reactions. And as we discussed yesterday, there are different results of bhakti at different stages. And even in the stage of sadhana bhakti, the characteristic of kleshagani, which means eradication of distress, takes place. That's something that we as sadhakas experience. And as quoted in the purport, Sarvadharman prityaja mamekam saranam vrajaham tvam sarvapapebhyo mokshayishyami. That if you surrender to Krishna, he protects you from all sinful reactions. And that surrendering, surrender means to, surrender to Krishna, surrender to Krishna's instructions, surrender to the process of bhakti yoga. And even in the beginning of the practice of bhakti yoga, one gets relief from sinful reactions.
Maharaj, would it be safe to say, I have one, would it be safe to say that therefore if one is not happy, then maybe he's doing something wrong? In devotional service even?
Yes. Yeah. Srila Prabhupada said we should be jolly.
Yes.
And if we're not jolly, it indicates that something's wrong.
We should
in our
look inside.
Practice, yeah.
Yeah.
How does it overlap with 10:14? So how does it overlap with 10:14:8?
I mean, tatenu kampam susamikshamana. Well, 10:14:8, basically says that. Well, that's a big topic actually, but 10:14:8 says that a devotee, while patiently suffering the reactions to his previous sins, should expect the Lord's mercy and, intensify his service to the Lord with his body, mind, and words. And that someone who does that earns the right to enter the kingdom of God. And in I think it's Sridhar Swami, in his commentary on the verse, says that the devotee simply has to remain alive in devotional service. Just like a son simply has to remain alive to inherit the father's property. So similarly, the devotee simply has to remain alive in devotional service in order to enter the kingdom of God. So, and another thing that Srila Prabhupada said is that Krishna will use the devotees' sinful reactions for the devotees, to the devotee's best advantage. In other words, you surrender to Krishna, and Krishna takes your sinful reactions. He holds on to them. And then he releases them at different times and in different ways that are most beneficial for the devotee.
If I remember correctly, in that purport, Sridhar Swami says that actually, if a person is sincere, even a sincere devotee, can have a tendency in the mind that lingers to perform something wrong. But if he's surrendered, then Krishna has agreed to correct him. So I guess that's one way of looking at it, that he holds it back and then puts. But another, what Sridhar Swami says is that he says that the reaction is not actually a karmic reaction. It's actually Krishna administering medicine from his own hand to the person, and therefore the reaction appears to be tailor-made for the mentality or the tendency that the person has, or the thing that he does that's not perfect yet, that will deal with that particular, like a doctor picking the right medicine for the right dose and the right amount for the right disease in order to cure the disease, rather than. And then at the end he says, just as one cannot enter fire without becoming fire, one cannot enter into pure devotional service without undergoing a rigid purificatory ceremony, which the Lord facilitates by personally administering medicine that appears like sinful reactions, but which is not. It's his own doing. Which should give us greater and greater faith in Krishna, in his capacity to take even personalities like us and deal with us in a way that we can go back to Godhead. Hare Krishna. Yes, Prana, go ahead.
Just a small reflection. I liked in the purport, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur quotes from the Amar Kosha dictionary to show that akritatmabhihi, which I guess in the verse meant one who's not sense-controlled, not self-controlled, something like that. He said that it could also indicate apurnatvam, or one whose life is empty. And then that purport kind of elaborated on what that meant, that one who has not learned the art of directing his love to Krishna is apurna, or one whose life is ultimately empty. And so I was just thinking that that the real element of self-control or sense control in that sense is actually directing one's senses and self to the loving service of Krishna.
Bhaktya mama vijanati yavanyas jasmitat. Correct. Maharaj wants it.
Yeah, the Ishopanishad begins Om Purnam Purnatidam Purnat Purnamudachyate, that the Lord is perfect and complete, and although so many perfect and complete units emanate from him, he remains the perfect and complete balance. And Srila Prabhupada comments that people in the material world feel incomplete because they are not connected with the complete whole. And they try to fill up their feeling of incompleteness with material things, which never make them feel complete, because they can feel complete only when they are reunited with the supreme complete whole. So that's like another angle also on the point of feeling empty, feeling incomplete, feeling empty.
Just a reflection on what you said just now. And even if you put the entire universe of material happiness, that still doesn't fill it in. Only Krishna can fill it in.
Prabhupada. Manmana bhavamad bhakto madhyaji namam namaskuru. Krishna's actually very kind. He's not hard to please. Because we're so hard to please because our senses are so out of control and our mind's out of control, nothing can satisfy us. And we're thinking that God must be unlimitedly like that, because he's unlimited everything. So he must be unlimitedly, difficult to please, and therefore why should I try even? But Krishna's actually, he's the supreme simple as well. Yeah. And all apparent contradictions become reconciled within his personality. And he just really becomes happy if you just think about it. Talk about it. Remember it. He becomes really happy. So simple. Mother Yashoda's trying to bind him up, so she gets all the ropes. And it's not that she got the rope and it wrapped around and round and round, and then when it came to the end, it was just 2 inches short. It wouldn't wrap around. So she got more and more and more and more, and she went like this, and it wouldn't wrap around, and it was still short. It's not that, it got longer and longer, so it wrapped around more and more and more, and then at the end it wasn't like that. It was that she'd get all the ropes in the whole village. Who knows how long it was, miles, who knows. And she went like this, and Krishna went, and she couldn't. And it was only when Krishna saw how charmingly she was trying, and she was sweating, and she was getting completely out of love, and then Krishna said, okay, you can do.
Thinking how devotional service is actually the only thing that's really always an option. I guess what I mean to say is we can always, no matter what circumstance, no matter what the karmic situation is, one can always still be a devotee. Whereas anything else is has the potential to be hampered by some circumstance. I can't maybe dress myself because I broke my arm, or I'm handicapped, something so simple, or I want to eat a sweet but there's no sweets available anywhere, something like that. It's always hampered, our free will is hampered by material circumstances, but devotional service is the only thing that where our free will is never hampered by material circumstances. We can always choose to be Krishna conscious, actually. So this sentiment that I can't be a devotee, I can't be Krishna consciousness, is just absolutely false.
Yeah, and we need the example. I just heard Prabhupada. He was in Toronto, and they wanted to serve him something, This was 1976. And he said, I don't have any teeth left. So I said, you can eat this, but I can't eat it. So I don't have any teeth because his teeth were not so good. And then if you watch Prabhupada, just how absolutely ecstatic he was at every moment, glowing and just overflowing with, satisfaction, all these things, even though there were, physical limitations that he was going through that, he would never say to anybody. So there's no material conditions. Ahaitukya patitata yayatma supersediti. There's no material conditions that can cause the soul not to be happy. Yes, Bud Patrick.
During the, what is this text? The 12th text, when it was explaining how Brahma can be either a jnani or a karmi or a devotee, I was wondering how at the beginning of creation, when he actually begins the process by creating a sacrifice, if he's not a devotee, does he not get initiated through the sound vibration of Krishna and see his form, or how does that work?
Yes. Actually, there was nothing to sacrifice with, so he had to take the articles of sacrifice from the body of Garbhodaka Shai Vishnu himself, and he had the first personalities that came out just from his mind, from his. We have a tendency to compare everything to us, and therefore we think, how is it that something like that can happen? But we don't realize that Brahma's body is not like our body. It doesn't have a gross physical body. He has a subtle body that's so much more potent. Just like in dream, I think I said this to you this morning during breakfast, or maybe it was anyway. In dreams, we can do things in the subtle body that we can't do. We can actually fly through the air. Anybody dream flying through the air? Yeah, you can't do that. So like that, if you can imagine, not just by sentiment, but by practical, experience, that in the subtle body you can do things that you can't do with the gross body. And then when you realize that Lord Brahma and Lord Indra, and especially Lord Brahma, he has the most subtle body, with the most intelligence. Like when he made a mistake and ran after his daughter for a moment, or just thought about it, then he was advised to give up that body. But when he gave up the body, it's not that like he died, or, he just gave up that mentality, and that mentality was so, close to being him, that it was like giving up, his body. So, we limit Krishna, we limit the Bhagavatam, and we tend to limit by our own, incapacity and limitations. And then we don't hear things, with wonder rather than we hear rather than with wonder and with, affection. We hear with skepticism or doubt. How can that be? How could somebody do that? Or how could that happen? Agyascha shadadanascha sankshiyatmi vinashati nayam lokos tinaparo na sukham sankshiyatmana. We can't be happy as long as we have doubts in our hearts. Therefore the doubts should be removed by this process that we're doing right now. But it requires us, like it goes to your point about the free will, and Maharaj was talking about the same thing. But in order to see the difference between, Krishna said in the Gita, Tattvavit tu Mahabaho, Guna Karma Vibhagayo, Guna Guneshu Vartanta Itimatva nasajjate. He said the person who actually has heard, who has knowledge, then he sees the difference between devotional service and fruitive activity, and he chooses devotional service. So that's the point that Maharaj was making, that that's your only free will, ultimately. Even though we have the example in the purport where once you buy a ticket to go to fly to California, that's where you're going to fly, no matter what. You know, you got in the plane's going, and you can't change that. That's like, but inside the plane you can do so many things. So we have that independent, small will, but it's not the same as just choosing devotional service. That goes to Maharaj's point, that that's the only real freedom that we have. All the other freedoms to choose will just get us in more and more bodies, more and more suffering. I have to go. I have an appointment at 7:30. I have to call somebody at 7:30. Okay. But you know, I mean, you've got some pretty devoted persons here. If you want to stay and continue to churn the ocean.
Well, I have something to attend to, but they can stay and churn.
There you go. There you go. Watch this. Oh, I almost made it. I wanted to give it to him, but I wanted to throw it right onto his neck from here. Go ahead, please. Oh, that's nice. Okay, everyone, thank you very much. Thanks to Giriraj Maharaj for coming and blessing us with this holy association and elevating the atmosphere, thickening and we hope everyone is happy and jolly in devotional service and stays that way by hearing about Krishna. And tomorrow is Saturday, and we're going to see you at 6 o'clock Central Time, right here in the live studios at Radha Lane. How auspicious is that? Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Gaur Premanandi. See you tomorrow. Hare Krishna.